G'day guys, Brock Layden here, and in today's video I'm going to discuss a tool which is going to help you manage your time better, and it's called the Eisenhower Matrix. Now essentially what it does is it breaks tasks down into 4 different quadrants, and those quadrants are determined based on whether the task is urgent or not urgent, and important or not important. So what does urgent mean? Urgent means something like a task or a piece of work that needs to be done quickly, like here and now. If it's urgent, it needs to be done now. If it's not urgent, it doesn't need to be done right now. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done, but just the urgency metric is around timing, how quickly something needs to be done. Now, the other axis looks at importance, so whether the task is important or not important, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, right? There are some tasks that we do, or some things that we do, some activities that we do, which just plain and simple aren't important, right? They don't drive an outcome. We don't need to do them. Think of, everyone's got things at work which, they themselves think are a waste of time, and maybe you do them because someone else, makes you do them or needs you to do them or whatever it is. So with any given task, if you assess it based on whether it's urgent or not urgent, and whether it's important or not important, you'll get a view of which quadrant it fits in. So if something is urgent and it's important, then that falls in quadrant 1, up here. If it's important but it's not urgent, then it falls in quadrant 2. If it's urgent but not important, then it's quadrant 3. And if it's not important and it's not urgent, then it's quadrant 4. Now, you can see here I've also got these words written in each quadrant, which is basically what let's say the guidance is to do with those tasks. So if a task is urgent and it's important, just do it, right? You got to do it now because it's time critical and it's actually important. If it's important but it's not urgent, then you decide to do it. So you schedule it. You decide when you're going to do it. You schedule it in. Now, the key thing with quadrant 2 activities is because where they are important but not urgent, they often get neglected because they're not urgent, and we spend more time dealing with tasks that are quadrant 1, so urgent and important. These tasks people are generally pretty good at doing because they're important and they're urgent, so you just get it done because you feel like you need to. But quadrant 2, we're not very good at doing because, like I said, these things aren't urgent. And so we often procrastinate on them and, we say we'll get to them tomorrow, we'll get to them next week. And what we often fill our time with instead is, again, those urgent quadrant 1 activities, but also the quadrant 3 activities, the activities which are urgent but not important. Now you can see here that the guidance is to delegate those tasks. And perhaps, let's say you're a graduate or a consultant and, you don't necessarily have people to delegate that work to. Delegate is just guidance, right? What you could be also trying to do is just try and do less of that work, right? Because if a task is urgent but it's not important, then sometimes the answer is to not do it, right? Similarly, with quadrant 4, tasks that are not important and they're not urgent, we should just be deleting those wherever possible. If they're not important, they're not urgent, then just get rid of it. But the key thing with quadrant 2 activities is, again, these are the ones which are so easy to put off. We never get them done. Think of things like exercise is a good example. So I think everyone would agree that exercise in some capacity is important, but it's also never urgent. A run can always wait till tomorrow. A gym session can always wait till tomorrow, and so often it does. Think of things like at work, it might be like planning activities or forward thinking, or maybe trying to create a strategy for how you want to do your work better. It's something which isn't urgent. It can always wait till tomorrow, but it is important. It could make you a lot more effective. And one of the key things to think about is that these quadrant 1 activities, they're fires, right? Have you ever heard a manager or someone say that they're firefighters, they're fighting fires all day? It's because all these things are coming up and they're urgent and they're important, they have to be dealt with. The powerful thing with quadrant 2 is that it's great at preventing those fires in the first place. So when we take the time and we carve out the time to do the work which is important but not urgent, we stop that work becoming urgent. It's that proactive stuff. It's that planning. It's the work that is important, but it's not urgent right now. Because if you have a piece of work which is important, but not urgent, and you continue to not do it, eventually it becomes urgent and it becomes one of those fires that you have to manage and deal with. So personally, I find it, I got the Eisenhower Matrix from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which I feel like is a book that I reference in almost every video I do. But the powerful thing for me is using it as kind of a thought exercise or a tool to do a bit of a quick audit in terms of like, where is most of my time going? Like, one exercise you could do is to estimate or track how much time you spend in each of those quadrants throughout a day. Are you spending all of your time fighting fires, things that need to be done right here, right now, and they're important? In which case you're spending a lot of time in quadrant 1. The natural antidote to that is to try and spend more time in quadrant 2. So spend a bit more time planning things, getting ahead of things, which is hard when you are right here, right now, fighting fires, right? But anytime you can carve out for quadrant 2 is going to, over time, reduce the amount of time that you're spending in quadrant 1. You might look at your days and see that you're doing things which are urgent, but none of them are really important. Like, you're just going here, there, and everywhere, and everything's due right here, right now, but none of it really matters. One thing to consider as well is that even though a task may not be intrinsically important to you, it might not drive any of your outcomes, depending on who it is that's asking that task of you, it could be important to you, right? Like, you could be asked to do a task which in and of itself means absolutely nothing to you, but if somebody who is, very important or very influential to your career is the one asking you to do it, then maybe that task is important to you and it actually is a quadrant 1 activity that you should be doing here and now. Or you might also find that you're spending a lot of time doing tasks which are neither urgent nor important, in which case, how can you try and create more tasks or find more work which is, again, not urgent, but is actually important? And when you think about, what's important, well, think about, like, what are your goals? I did a video, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, I think it was 2 weeks ago, talking about goal setting, right? So if you have a clear view of your goals and where you're trying to go, then the work that's important is the work that gets you closer to those goals. If you look at what you actually do throughout a day, throughout a week, what you might find is that a lot of it actually doesn't move the needle on what your goals are. The work sits somewhere in the not important quadrants, and it might be urgent or not urgent. But so have a think about, like, what your goals are, the work that you're doing. Is it important? Is it working towards those? And is it all here and now, urgent, bang, 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 you have to deal with it, you're always trying to chase your tail? Or are you actually already kind of ahead of the game, you're planning, you're doing those, those habits? Again, like, exercise is a good example. Like, what are those habits, those things which aren't urgent, right? They can always wait, but you choose to carve time out for them, you decide to do them, which in the long run actually, make the difference. So I'll bring this up one last time. Urgent, not urgent, important, not important. If it's quadrant 1, do it. If it's quadrant 2, decide when you're going to do it. If it's quadrant 3, delegate it or try to minimize it if you don't have anyone to delegate to. And if it's quadrant 4, delete it. Just get it out. The one exception for quadrant 4 might be, there are some things that we do which are neither urgent nor important, but we do them because they're, just relaxing, let's say, watching TV or whatever. Although you could make the case that perhaps that is an important task if you genuinely need that recovery. So it's a quick one this week. Have a reflection on it this week as you're doing your work. The work that you're doing, which of the 4 quadrants does it sit in, and how can you potentially move the needle on that? Thanks, guys.